Frugal Frau. I'm Sukey, your host, and today I'm going to show you how I can make rustic shelving from just some materials I have on hand. And those materials include saplings from the woods, so I'll have to go out and cut those. Rough sawn lumber, which of course we have plenty of that around here, and I have pieces that I'm allowed to access that aren't for specific other projects. And I found a scrap 2x4 in the barn that I'm going to cut to length. This is just a piece of 2x4, and I'm going to show you how to make the pegs, and this is a completed peg right here. And that becomes a shelf support when it sits into the hole that I'm going to drill into the 2x4. And we're also going to do in a future video from the scraps of this sapling or any other saplings we cut, we're going to make some pipes, cut kind of like that. And we have friends that smoke a little fancy pipe tobacco now and then, so they're going to get some pipes. So we'll show you how we make those. But before we get started, please like, subscribe, and comment. It helps us out, and ask your questions in the comments section too. Thank you very much, and let's get started. All right, I'm going to measure and see kind of where I want to place my shelves. And I'm measuring for my supports. I'm making the supports out of a 2x4, so I'm going to find the center. So I measure halfway from one end, halfway from the other. Then I'm going to take my square after I mark the other side and find the exact center. I went ahead and marked the edges too. I probably didn't really need to do that, but I did it anyways. Since this is just a rustic shelf, I decided I'll just use the skill saw and get this quickly sawn in half. To make sure that I mark the two supports for the shelves identically, I clamped them together, making sure the tops were even, and I also marked a little arrow at the top of each piece so that when I install these, I know which end is the exact top, so that my shelves will be all nice and lined up. The peg holes will be lined up, and the shelves will be flat and level. I marked my peg holes to be 4 inches apart, and that gives me lots of options for adjustability, since the pegs can be removed and changed around depending on how tall or short the items I'm going to put on the shelves will be. I just used a square to draw a line across both so that the holes will be lined up. After marking the vertical positions of the pegs, I am now finding the center, and I am marking a line which is perpendicular to those vertical marks so that I can put the peg hole centered onto each 2x4. Next, I use the spade bit to make a starting hole for each of the centers that I'm going to drill out in a moment with that same spade bit. This just helps it stay in line when I'm drilling. Now I just drill all of these out, and I drill all the way through. I am using a 3/4 inch spade bit because I'm going to cut the ends of my pegs to 3/4 inches to fit in. Now, when I install these, I'm going to put a cleat on the bottom and top of each of the 2x4s, and that's so when I pound the pegs in, they have a place to go other than hitting up against the wall. And that means I install these cleats on the back side of each 2x4. And then if necessary, I drill out a little bit in case the cleat covered up the hole. Now, I need to make my pegs, and I'm going to make them out of striped maple, so I'm here cutting out some striped maple saplings to use for my pegs. There. I have one sapling now cut. I'll probably need 2 saplings. I'm going to make each peg about 12 inches long, and it'll have a 2-inch end, and that gives me 10 inches of space for a shelf. I tied my 2 saplings together to make it easy to carry, and I took them back to the shop in the basement. Now I'm just measuring my 12-inch lengths so that I can saw each sapling into 12-inch pieces. I'm marking my initial saw line with a small cut with a knife. This cut also serves as a starting point for the saw blade, and I'm just using a pretty rough crosscut saw for this. I have bony knees, so I used my sweatshirt to pad my knee to help me hold this. I'm marking a square on one end of each of the 12-inch pieces, and that will help me to begin the cut. And I just used the 3/4 inch spade bit to do this. So first I am cutting with a draw shave around the end from about the 2-inch point and close to the square lines. I just used the utility knife to cut a 2-inch little notch around the entire circumference of the end of each of these, and that prevents me from going too far with the draw shave. With the peg secured in the vise on the bench, I take the draw shade and now I'm just cutting down to close to my square line marked on the end. I have this beveled down, flat side out. I put it back in the vise now, and I'm finding the center, so I'm going from corner to corner, just using the straight, flat edge of the spade bit as a marking implement. I have a scrap of wood in which I drilled out a 3/4 inch hole with the spade bit, and I just trace the circle on there so that I have a guide when I start carving this down to the circular shape into which the peg will be placed in those 2x4s that I cut earlier. You'll notice I wear gloves. That's because this draw shave is really sharp, and I just don't want to nick my fingers. So now I just begin shaving it down to the circular shape by getting the corners off first and then gently rounding it. And I just keep shaping it until I have a nice, approximately 2-inch long peg on the end of this shelf support. I've done all the rough cutting and carving on my peg, and now I'm taking a knife just to taper the end a little bit because I am going to use the roundover plane that Tom made to finish these pegs off. That little taper just helps the roundover plane get started. Make a couple gentle circular rounds first. And as I progress, I'm actually pushing down quite hard on the top because I need the peg to come all the way through the entire width of this particular plane. I've cut as far as I can cut with the plane, and now I'm just going to clean up the very close end to the actual shelf support section with a knife just to get some of the ditzels off and make a smoother transition. So here's the actual shelf support and peg end. One simple unit, very rustic, but it works. I made 6 of these today. I might make some more later if I ever need them, but this is all I need for now. So now I'm back in the root cellar and I'm installing the supports I made. And you can see here the cleat behind, and that gives me space to pound those pegs in so that they don't just butt up against the wall when I pound them in. They have space to be there. And I'm making sure I got it level. And of course it is on a stud because I marked that earlier. And now I just screw in the bottom 2 screws. And once again, I use the level so I can mark the exact top of the other support so that everything will line up and the holes will be level with each other. And then I simply screw in the second support. Oops, it slipped a little bit. Get it back up to that line. Alrighty, good girl. Oh, this cordless driver is one of my good friends in the workshop. Now comes the fun part. I can bang those pegs in. And right now I'm only going to install the first 2 pegs and 1 shelf because I just have a few cabbages to collect out of the garden to put on the shelf at this point. I want the other cabbages to get a little larger before I actually harvest them. So I can wait a couple of weeks and they will be fine even if we get a light frost, which I think we are supposed to get by end of next week. And here is the shelf I made from some scrap lumber, and it just sits on there, and that way this whole system is completely adjustable. Here I am. I'm just going to harvest 3 cabbages today because they're the largest ones, plus the one I have in the refrigerator, which I am eating. I start my cabbages around June in the greenhouse, but I do not put the plants out until August because the pest pressure is too great until that time. And they just grow better in the cooler weather. And now I have a place in my root cellar where I can store my cabbages. And I will obviously need more shelves in this when I harvest the rest of them.